Hello, everyone. Welcome. 1 second. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining here today. And we are going to start with some opening prayers. There is a link to the opening prayers in the description of the video. So you just open that. We will say the first one 3 times, and then the next ones we'll say 1 time each. And we will say these in Tibetan, but if you're more comfortable saying these in English, you can read along in English, and that's just fine too. Organ yogi numjan sampamage sarompola yatsen chogi ngorupne pemajungne jesurak kordu kandra mangpokor ketki jesudak drupki jinji lopchi asheksu so Guru Pema City Home. Organ Yogi Num Jansam Pema Ge Sardompola Yatsen Chogi Ngorupne Pema Jungne Jesurak Kordu Kandro Mangpokor Ketki Jesudak Drupki Jinji Lopchi Asheksu So Guru Pema City Home. Organ Yogi Num Jansam Pema Ge Sardompola Yatsen Chogi Ngorupne Pema Jungne Jesurak Kordu Kandro Mangpokor Ketki Jesudak Drupki Jinji Lopchi Asheksu So Guru Pema City Home. Continuing on. Kunzan dosem garab shiri sing pema gara jebani shunga sozo dubna tatengatsa so kate lama namla so adem. Ogmin chuki hingi podrang na dosum sange kungi ngawonyet rangsem choko ngonson tonset pe tsawe lama namla so adem. Sashi pochu chuching me to tram re ramling jinye de gempadi sange zing du mikte puwahi droko namda jingla chopashok tram guru ratna mandala putsa mega samudra saparana samaya om. Samchen namki sampadang lohi jejak jitawar jechon tumo tepahi jogi gorlo gordu som. All right, so today, as usual, we are going to start with a brief meditation on our breath to stabilize our minds. Before we start, just take a moment to center in your compassionate intention for being here today. We are here not just to entertain ourselves or just here to relax ourselves or find joy for ourselves, but we're here so that we can learn how to relax our minds and open our hearts so that we can be of benefit to all beings. So take a moment to relax into that. All right. So our opening meditation is a simple meditation on the breath. And this meditation helps to stabilize our minds, which our minds are usually so busy all of the time and just flying around like a restless bird. When we leave our minds to do their own thing and kind of act up in their own habitual way, it just flies around like a restless bird and flitting from branch to branch, flying up into the trees, flying back down into the meadows, flying back up into another tree. And with this analogy, if we think of our minds as a little bird flying around, the branches and the ground and each of the trees represent the demands that we receive from our five senses, as well as our thoughts and our emotions. We fly around like to this tree, to that tree, to this branch, to that branch, down to the meadow, up to the tree, just flitting and flying all over the place all the time. Each of these perches seems interesting and powerfully attractive to our minds. And since there's always something going on in us and around us, it's very hard for this poor restless bird to settle down. It's constantly having to pick up and fly to something else. And this kind of flitting about, while our senses are overloaded and our thoughts are demanding recognition and our emotions are demanding recognition, all of this makes it very hard for us to stay relaxed and focused. Yongey Mingyur Rinpoche says, most of us, when we look at something, hear something, or watch a thought or emotion, have some sort of judgment about the experience. This judgment can be understood in terms of three basic branches: the I like it branch, the I don't like it branch, or the I don't know branch. Each of these branches spreads out into smaller branches: good branch, bad branch, pleasant branch, unpleasant branch. I like it because branch, I don't like it because branch. Could be good or bad branch. Could be nice or not branch. Could be good and bad, pleasant and unpleasant branch. And the neither good nor bad, pleasant nor unpleasant branch. The possibilities represented by all these branches tempt the little bird to flutter between them, investigating each one. So in this meditation that we're about to do, we give this little bird a break. We allow the little bird to settle. Resting our attention on our breath trains our mind to be calm and relaxed, while also alert and wakeful. It also creates space in the mind, which helps us to balance our emotions, allowing time between action and reaction. Establishing a stable and spacious mind is the first step in the development of bodhicitta, which is the compassionate wish to free all sentient beings from suffering and bring them to Buddhahood. So take a comfortable seat, either in a chair or cross-legged on the floor, and place your hands in your lap, gently relaxed. Make sure that your spine is straight, your shoulders are open, your elbows are a bit out, so your rib cage is open. You're not going to collapse into yourself, and you're not a little pterodactyl or a little Tyrannosaurus Rex, like pinning your arms in. We're going to be more open. Your eyes are going to remain open as well, looking gently down. You can kind of follow the line of your nose down to find a place in front of you where you can rest them gently. And then lastly, put the tip of your tongue right behind your front teeth. So you're sitting up straight, muscles are relaxed, tongue is behind your front teeth. And just relax completely and breathe normally. Don't try to change your breath at all. Just allow your natural rhythm of breathing to take place. And now place your attention lightly on your breath. It's like taking your pulse. You don't put any pressure on it, just observe it. Your attention is like a feather, gently riding on the surface of your breath. And if thoughts come up, just let them go. They're like bubbles popping on the surface of a pond. So just let them pop. Don't even look to see what they are. Your meditation is not lost by hearing your thoughts, but by following them down the road. So when you find yourself following a thought, just drop it. Let it pop and return to your breath. Over and over again, we will return to our single-pointed concentration on our breath. Gossamer thin, feather-like attention on our breath. And we'll meditate for 5 minutes, starting now. So that is a very simple meditation that you can do nearly any time that you just have a couple minutes. It's extremely helpful for stabilizing our emotions, creating space in the mind, and doing that helps us engage in more beneficially in the world, right? Like if we're not distracted by our anger and our anxiety, if we're not preoccupied with our judgments of whatever situation that we're in, then we can engage directly and compassionately in any given situation. So that is very helpful meditation to do. Even if you only practice it for just a minute or two every day, it's helpful. And as you practice, you can continue to add on time. You can practice a little bit more, and grow in the amount of time that you can spend meditating in that way. And it's great because also you can do that pretty much any time and no one will even notice that you're meditating. If you just do it for a couple, like 30 seconds or something, no one would even notice. The other day I was at work. I went into a Zoom meeting that wound up being a larger group of people than I was expecting. It was I sit on our diversity, as our DEI council, diversity, equity, and inclusion council. And when I joined the meeting, there were more people than I expected, and I was like kind of freaked out. Some of them I had some, friction with. Some people were, high up in the company, and I was like, "Ooh, a little scared" first when I jump into this Zoom meeting. But I remembered that I was there for a compassionate reason. I remembered my intention for being there, and I realized that my anxiety was going to prevent me from engaging skillfully. And so I just took a couple seconds at the beginning of that meeting. No one even noticed. Took a couple seconds to just do this breath meditation, and then I was able to engage more skillfully and compassionately. So it's very easy to do at any point. So today, I want to talk about empathy. Empathy has been on my mind lately, as is the way that when we experience suffering, we use that suffering as a wedge to separate ourselves from others, instead of seeing our suffering as a thing that makes us just like everyone else and helping us to feel a sense of connection. The Buddha taught that all beings suffer. All beings are alike in their suffering and in their desire for happiness. Yet, when we suffer, we think that it's like we're the only ones who have ever suffered. Like the only one who has ever suffered a breakup or lost a child or lived through some traumatic experience. And it's not true. Countless beings are suffering just like you have, just like I have, just like we all have. We have all suffered. And yeah, there's some unique details. Maybe, you're the only person who had that experience in that minute, in that place, in that, with that particular person. The details really of our experience tend to catch us up and making us think, we get fixated on the details of our experience. But the fact that we are suffering, whatever that suffering was, whether it's fear or pain or feeling like you're not loved or hunger or thirst or any kind of suffering that we can experience, we are not the only ones who have experienced that suffering. So many beings have experienced that suffering too. And we can engage with our suffering in a way that causes more suffering to ourselves by using it as a wall between us and others. Or we can engage with our suffering in a way that breaks down those walls and helps us to open our hearts to others. And that is a way that we can use our suffering as a path to happiness, by using our suffering to remind ourselves that we are not different from anyone else. We are all alike, and we all wish to be free from suffering. I I watched a documentary the other day. This was also at work. I work in behavioral health. We watched a documentary called The Wisdom of Trauma by Dr. Gabor Mate. And this documentary follows Dr. Gabor Mate. He's like he's like an expert in the realm of like trauma and addiction. And it follows him as he like works with different people, and you see the way that he helps people work through their trauma. And he talks about just the nature of trauma and how it functions in the mind, what it does to us, the effects of it, and how we heal from it. It's and there was this scene that really I found really powerful. It was at a prison, and they had a lot of prisoners, maybe like 100 prisoners outside in a circle. And this facilitator, this woman, was in the middle of the circle, and she shouted out on a bullhorn these questions. She said, during your first 18 years of life, if a parent or other adult in the household often or very often would swear at you, insult you, put you down, or humiliate you, step inside the circle. And like 90% of the people in this circle all took a step forward. And she says, if a parent or other adult in the household often pushed, grabbed, slapped, or threw something at you, step inside the circle. Again, like 3/4 of the people there stepped inside the circle. If a parent or other adult in the household often or very often hit you so hard that you had marks or were injured, step inside the circle. Again, so many people took a step in. Another like 3/4, like 3/4 of the people there stepped inside. She says, if you often felt that no one in your family loved you, step inside the circle. Again, like 90% of them each took a step forward. And it's so powerful to watch all of these people. They thought they were so separate and different from what, they didn't recognize this shared humanity until this exercise. And suddenly they're seeing that all these other people around them in this prison, they are suffering just like them. They had the same awful childhood. They had the same feeling of never being loved. They had the same feeling of never being safe. They had the same feeling of being, completely responsible for their own well-being, that no one would ever look out for them, that no one would wish them well. And understanding that they weren't alone in that was powerfully healing. And there were interviews with some of these prisoners where they talked about the healing power of that, of understanding that they're not alone, that trauma is not something that they themselves, bear alone, that others have that too. And that was a major reason why they acted in ways that harmed themselves and others, because of that sense of separation, because of that sense of shame, because of that feeling of, that awful feeling of solitude that happens when we allow our suffering to come between us and others. It's powerfully healing to find out that you're not alone, to find out that we are all alike. And suddenly everyone becomes your sister and brother in suffering. Loneliness and separation cause us pain, and it often drives us to act in ways that harm ourselves and others. Loneliness is also a tool often wielded by abusers. An abuser may convince their victim that they're all alone, that their pain separates them from others, that they'll be rejected by others because of what's happened to them. And this is a way in which abusers keep their victims silent and compliant. Well, in a way, one could say that samsara is the wheel of cyclic existence, which we are trapped in due to our own delusion. In one way, one could say that samsara is the biggest abuser of them all. Samsara also deceives us into believing that we are alone, we are separate. And that sense of separation solidifies our destructive relationship with samsara. We believe this myth of separation, even though we can use our own senses to see that every defining quality that we have, who and how we are, the people around us, the situations we face, every line in the sand that we could possibly draw is subject to change. It's impermanent. Yet we believe in the solidity of those lines in the sand and the reason why we're separate and different. Yonggi Mingyur Rinpoche says, nevertheless, deeply entrenched in our habits of relating to ourselves, other people, things, and situations is a kind of lonely separateness, a sense of independent being that obscures our connectedness to others. This very subtle sense of difference or separation lies at the heart of many personal and interpersonal problems. The practice of empathy takes whatever difficulty or crisis we may be facing as a starting point for recognizing our similarity to others. It gradually opens our mind to a profound experience of fearlessness and confidence, while transforming personal problems into a strong motivation to help others. There's an old story told in several sutras about a woman who suffered the death of her young son. She was so in shock when her son died that she refused to accept the fact that he was dead. And she ran from house to house in the village seeking medicine to revive her child. Of course, no one could help her because her child was dead. And some people tried to point out the fact that he was dead, but she couldn't hear it. She just could not hear it. She was so in shock and so in grief. She couldn't accept the situation. The one person recognized the state of her mind, that she was just deranged by grief, and advised her to seek the Buddha, the most capable of physicians. And the Buddha was staying in a monastery nearby. So she grabbed her child and clutching her child close to her chest, she ran to where the Buddha was staying and asked him for medicine to help her child. The Buddha was in the middle of giving a talk to a large number of people, but the woman just shoved her way in and was so distressed that the Buddha answered her request. He said, "Go back to your village and bring me a few mustard seeds from a house where no one has ever died." So she was so grateful, and she ran back to her village and began asking each of her neighbors for mustard seeds. Her neighbors were like, "Sure, here's some mustard seeds." But then she had to ask, "Has anyone died here?" And they looked at her oddly. And then, some of them just nodded, yeah. And some of them, told her the circumstances in which, "Oh yeah, my uncle died here, this time," or, "Oh yeah, and then my mother died here at this time," and, told them the circumstances of these deaths. So by the time she, completed her rounds through the village and visited every house, she had heard story after story after story of all of the losses of everyone in this village. And she understood through that experience that she was not the only person in the world who had suffered a terrible personal loss. And this experience cut deeper than words ever could. You can't tell someone, you can't just she couldn't hear it, just like someone was like, "Yeah, your son died," like everyone else does at some point. She couldn't hear that. But by going house to house and hearing these stories, she truly experienced the fact that she was not the only person who had suffered a terrible personal loss. Change, loss, and grief are common to all. So although she was still grief-stricken at the loss of her child, she recognized that she wasn't alone. And her heart just cracked open. After the funeral ceremonies for her son were completed, she joined the Buddha and his disciples, and she devoted her life to assisting others in achieving that same degree of recognition that we are all alike. It's so easy to think that we're the only ones who suffer, while others were just born happy by some accident of birth. Whether we suffer from anxiety, depression, trauma, grief, unemployment, homelessness, chronic illness, terrorism, war, famine, thirst. I mean, the list of possible sufferings is endless, right? No matter what we're suffering from, though, it's easy to sink into a sense of isolation in that suffering. But when we practice loving kindness, compassion, that sense of isolation will diminish. At the same time, our confidence and sense of usefulness will grow. We begin to see that we're not the only person feeling scared, hurt, or vulnerable. We begin to understand that the welfare of other beings is essential in discovering our own peace of mind. And once we've begun to stabilize the mind somewhat through attention to our experience, such as the breath meditation that we did together, we can begin to proceed to open our attention a little bit more broadly. We can use the practice of loving kindness and compassion to dissolve the delusion of independently existing selves and others. That is a delusion, that we exist independently from others. So this practice could also be thought of as formally practicing empathy, like very intentionally, formally practicing empathy. And empathy is the ability to identify with or understand the situations in which others may find themselves. So why is the practice of empathy called loving kindness / compassion? Loving kindness, compassion, loving kindness and compassion. It's a long phrase. Like, why don't we just pick one word? Why don't we just say it's a practice of compassion or it's a practice of loving kindness? Yongey Mingyur Rinpoche says, according to the Buddhist understanding, there are two aspects to empathy. Loving kindness refers to the desire for everyone to achieve happiness in this life and the effort we put forth to achieve that goal. Compassion is the aspiration to relieve everyone from the fundamental pain and suffering that stems from not knowing their basic nature and the effort we put forth toward helping them achieve relief from that fundamental pain. These two concerns, the longing for happiness and the wish to be released from suffering, are common to all living creatures, though not necessarily verbally or consciously, and not always in the complex terms of human consciousness. The suffering of sentient beings is vast and varied. Hell beings suffer from heat and cold. Hungry ghosts suffer from hunger and thirst. Animals suffer from stupidity, predation, and enslavement. Humans suffer from birth, old age, sickness, and death. Jealous gods suffer from warfare and jealousy. And even the long-lived gods suffer tremendously when they finally reach the end of their lives. Happiness is a more generalized term that could more simply be described as flourishing. It means having enough to eat, a place to live, and to go about one's life without threat of harm. In this sense, all sentient beings wish to be happy and free from suffering. The process of developing loving kindness and compassion is generally taught in stages. As with the woman who lost her child, it begins with acknowledging our own suffering and our own wish for release. Gradually, we extend that wish for happiness and freedom from suffering from ourselves to others. But we start by understanding our own predicament and our own desire for freedom. Yongey Mingyur Rinpoche says, this slow and steady path leads from awareness of our own difficulties to an awakening of a potential far deeper and more profound than we could ever imagine as we sit in our cars in the middle of a traffic jam, cursing the conditions that caused the delay, or standing in line at the bank, wishing desperately that the line would move faster. The initial stage is commonly referred to as ordinary loving kindness / compassion, which begins with developing a sense of loving kindness and compassion toward oneself and extending it toward those we know. The second stage is often known as immeasurable loving kindness and compassion, an extension of the aspiration for happiness and release from suffering toward those we don't know. And the third stage is known as bodhicitta, the mind that is awake to the suffering of all sentient beings and spontaneously works to relieve that suffering. Ordinary loving kindness and compassion include several phases. First, we must learn to develop a sense of tenderness toward ourselves and appreciation of our own positive qualities. This doesn't mean feeling tenderness for ourselves, doesn't mean feeling sorry for ourselves or replaying scenes and we've suffered or recounting our regrets and thinking like, well, if I'd only gone this way or if I'd only had that way, if I had only, whatever, I'd only had perfect parents, if I'd only been born rich, whatever. That's not what it means. It just means developing a sense of tenderness that is not, it's not specific like that. Well, okay. It also doesn't mean, the other thing we're doing is we're appreciating our own positive qualities. And by positive qualities, you don't necessarily mean that we're the best tennis player in the world or, our ability to write really well or our ability to climb trees or whatever it is. It's not just positive qualities like what you can accomplish like that either. This is way more basic. What we're doing here is we look at our experience of ourself in the present moment as an object of meditative focus. We're not looking at the concept of I, but rather the experience of being alive in this moment. And that's what we are developing a sense of tenderness towards, is simply our own being that is alive. So let's do a brief self-compassion meditation. And it's important to practice this in short sessions and then allow the mind to rest. Otherwise, if you do really long sessions of this, you do it too much, this precious awareness can become a concept rather than an experience. We want to make sure that this stays in the realm of experience so that, like the woman who, lost her child, it didn't work for someone to just tell her conceptually that she's not the only person who lost a child. She had to experience the grief of so many people in the village for her to understand that. So we want this to stay in the realm of experience. So sit in your meditation posture, your spine straight and your body relaxed. Allow your mind to rest in a state of objectless attention. This doesn't mean letting your mind wander or daydream. It's simply resting the mind in its natural clarity. And Chagdad Tuku says, allowing the mind to rest is an effortless process that reveals an indwelling awareness, an awareness that is non-dual, not a subjective awareness of an object. And usually when people meditate, they try to do something, but instead of trying to do something, we're just going to let the mind relax. Don't block it, don't follow it, just let it be. We are allowing our mind to rest in the spontaneously open space in which thoughts arise and subside. You may see thoughts arising and subsiding. That's okay. Just let them be. Just rest. Just take a moment and rest your mind. Now bring your attention to your body. Allow yourself to recognize that you have a body. Allow yourself to recognize that you have a mind capable of being aware of your body. Allow yourself to recognize how wonderful these very basic facts of your existence really are. How precious it is to have a body. how precious it is to have a mind capable of being aware of this body. Rest in that simple appreciation for a moment. Then gently introduce the thought, how nice it would be if I were always able to enjoy the sense of basic aliveness. How nice it would be if I could always enjoy this sense of well-being and all the causes that lead to feeling contented, open to all possibilities. How nice that would be. And you can think or repeat after me. May I achieve happiness and the causes of happiness. May I be free of suffering and the causes of suffering. And then allow your mind to rest again in objectless attention, open and relaxed. Just let go of that contemplation and rest your mind. If you practice this meditation formally, you want to sit in that 7-point posture that I described at the beginning for our breath meditation. You can also do this meditation just really quick at any point in your day. And all of the meditations we'll go over today. You can do at any point. If you do them formally, do the 7-point posture that I discussed. If you do it informally, like when you're logging into a Zoom meeting, just do the 2-point posture, which is make sure your spine is straight and your body is relaxed. And then you can just meditate real quick. And once you've become somewhat familiar with your own experience of relief, by doing that self-compassion meditation, once you've become somewhat familiar with your own experience of relief, you can extend that possibility to others. Recognizing the suffering of others can actually transform your own experience. Yongey Mingyur Rinpoche explains that the second stage of ordinary loving kindness compassion practice is acknowledging that whatever is going on inside someone else's mind is probably very similar to what's going on in yours. And when we remember this, we gradually come to realize that there's no reason to be frightened of anyone or anything. We're frightened in most cases because we don't recognize that whomever or whatever we're facing is just like us, a creature that only wants to flourish. So this practice is very much like the one we just did. So sit in your meditation posture, spine straight, body relaxed. And allow your mind to rest for a few moments in objectless attention. Relax as you would after accomplishing a big task and Just observe your mind and all the thoughts, feelings, and sensations passing through it. And now lightly bring your attention to someone toward whom you feel some tenderness, affection, or concern. This could be a parent, a sibling, a child, a pet, a friend, a coworker, a stranger you passed on the street. Anyone towards anyone towards whom you feel some warmth or love, affection. If someone unexpected comes to mind, just go with it. That's an example of the mind's natural wisdom asserting itself. So now that you have this person or being in mind, allow the sense of warmth or affection to settle in your mind. And then allow your mind to rest in objectless attention. Now return to that sense of warmth or affection. Allow yourself to wish that the object of your meditation might experience the same sense of openness and warmth that you feel toward them. And then allow the mind to rest in objectless attention. Now place your attention again lightly on the being that you've chosen while asking yourself, how much do I want to be happy? How much do I want to avoid pain or suffering? Let your thoughts on these points be as specific as possible. For example, if you're stuck somewhere very hot, would you rather move to a cooler place? If you feel some sort of physical pain, would you like the pain to stop? And as you think about your own answers, gradually turn your attention to the being that you've chosen and imagine how they would feel in the same situation. And then allow the mind to rest in objectless attention. Cultivating loving kindness and compassion toward those we know and care about isn't so difficult because no matter how annoying or frustrating they may be sometimes, at the end of the day, we still love them. It's a little harder to extend that warmth toward those with whom we have personal or professional problems or those who we actively dislike or fear. Yongey Mingyur Rinpoche says, as an exercise, imagine piercing your cheeks with two very sharp needles, one in the left cheek, one in the right. Is the pain you experience in the right cheek any different from the pain you experience in the left? The pain in your right cheek represents the unhappiness and suffering you experience. The pain in the left cheek represents the pain and unhappiness experienced by someone or something you don't like. Is one less painful than the other? Maybe yes, maybe no. Maybe you've become so used to the needle stuck in the right cheek for so long that you don't notice it anymore. It's a dull pain. But the needle stuck in your left cheek is a fresh pain. You're acutely aware of it. You could pull the needle from your right cheek by working with practicing loving kindness and compassion with yourself or those toward whom you already feel some tenderness. But the needle in your left cheek remains stuck until you actually begin to extend that aspiration for happiness and relief from suffering to those you don't like. You want them to suffer or to be unhappy. Maybe you feel jealousy toward them or resentment. But who is feeling the pain of this resentment, jealousy, or dislike? You. So the loving kindness, compassion exercise that we just did with someone who we love or feel tenderness towards, you can repeat that same exercise toward someone you don't like. If you have a problem with your boss, use them as your object of meditation. If you have an angry customer yell at you at work, use them as your object of meditation. If you're afraid of snakes or spiders, use them as your object of meditation. Find that sameness and get over that sense of separation. You can use this meditation to find that sameness with all beings. We all suffer and we all want to be free from suffering. We all suffer and we want to be happy. And practicing in this way has an additional benefit of helping us act more skillfully with others when we encounter interpersonal difficulties. When we have empathy and understanding, we interact more compassionately, and sometimes even just the subtle shift in our attitude puts others at ease, allowing for a less stressful and emotional interaction in which they also find it easier to be kind. So it's actually pretty amazing. I can say from my own experience, I've had some people in my life who I've had interpersonal difficulties with. And if I remember to do these loving kindness and compassion meditations, it's amazing how the interactions suddenly change. Even though I might not feel like I'm acting any different in the moment, that person starts acting differently towards me. And I think it's because that subtle shift, we're no longer putting off this like judgment. I don't like you. And it's amazing how just doing this simple meditation, it can really transform our relationships in profound ways that we can't really imagine until you try it. The next step in stretching our loving kindness and compassion is to extend that warmth to beings that we don't know. So we start with ourselves, then we go to people or beings who we know and love or feel affection towards. Then we go to beings that we know who we don't like, don't feel affection towards, or fear. And then we go to beings we don't know or can't even imagine knowing. Yongey Mingyur Rinpoche says, as we hear about tragedies around the world or even in our neighborhoods, a sense of helplessness and hopelessness may develop. There are only so many causes we can join, and sometimes our work and family lives prevent us from helping out in a direct way. The practice of immeasurable loving kindness and compassion helps to relieve that sense of hopelessness. It also fosters a sense of confidence that whatever situation in which we find ourselves and whomever we face, we have a basis for relating in a way that is not quite so fearful or hopeless. We can see possibilities to which we might otherwise be blind and begin to develop a greater appreciation for the possibilities within us. A particularly useful practice for generating this immeasurable loving kindness and compassion is the practice of Tonglen, or sending and receiving. And through the practice of Tonglen, we open our minds to infinite creatures and wish for their well-being. The result is that eventually our minds become clearer, calmer, and more focused and aware. You develop the capacity to help others in infinite ways, both directly and indirectly, by working with your mind in this way. So let's do this real quick. Sit in meditation posture, your spine straight, body relaxed, and allow your mind to rest for a moment in objectless attention. Then gently bring your attention to the thought, just as I want to achieve happiness and avoid suffering, other beings also feel the same way. Just as I want to achieve happiness and avoid suffering, other beings also feel the same way. You don't need to visualize specific beings, but you can if you find it helpful. Eventually, though, this practice extends beyond anyone or anything you can imagine to include animals, insects, and all the creatures who have suffered or will suffer in any way. The point is simply to remember that the world is filled with an infinite number of beings, and to think, just as I want happiness, all beings want happiness. Just as I wish to avoid suffering, all beings wish to avoid suffering. Allow these thoughts to roll around in your mind, and you'll begin to find yourself actively engaged in wishing for others' happiness and freedom from suffering. Just as I want happiness, all beings want happiness. Just as I wish to avoid suffering, all beings wish to avoid suffering. The next step is to focus on your breathing as a means of sending whatever happiness you may have experienced or are currently experiencing to all sentient beings and absorb their suffering. As you exhale, imagine all of the happiness and benefits you've acquired during your life pouring out of yourself in the form of clear light. This light extends out toward all beings and dissolves into them, fulfilling all their needs and eliminating their suffering. Imagine they all experience immeasurable happiness. And as you inhale, imagine the pain and suffering of all sentient beings as a dark, oily smoke being absorbed through your nostrils and dissolving into your heart. And imagine that all beings are freed from their suffering. So we breathe in, oily smoke of all beings suffering. They are freed from suffering. As you exhale, all the happiness and causes of happiness pouring out of yourself in the form of clear light. May all beings be free of suffering. May all beings have immeasurable happiness. And just do that breathing for a few moments. And now allow your mind to rest in objectless attention. So that Tonglen practice is one you can definitely do on your own. And if you'd like to do a longer practice of that, you can alternate between the breathing exercise and then allow your mind to rest. And you can go back to doing the breathing exercise. Allow your mind to rest. Breathing, rest, breathing, rest. And you can alternate in that way for the length of time that you have available. Allowing our mind to rest in between these stages deepens our practice. So it's an important element. And if you're practicing on your own, you can allow your mind to cue you when you're ready to rest, and you can tell when you're when the contemplation becomes stagnant and not fresh anymore, and you kind of feel like you're kicking a dead horse. Then allow the mind to rest. And then in that state of rest, when your mind starts becoming active again, it starts becoming distraction and seeking movement, then go back to your contemplation, which would be the breathing exercise here. And so you can alternate in that way. The final stage in loving kindness, compassion is bodhicitta, which means the awakened mind. Yongey Mingyur Rinpoche says, within the Buddhist tradition, we recognize two kinds of bodhicitta, absolute and relative. Absolute bodhicitta refers to the mind that has become completely pure through accomplishing all the levels of training, and which consequently sees the nature of reality directly, without question or wavering. The seed of Buddha nature latent within all sentient beings has grown into a magnificent tree. Capable of seeing and knowing everything, absolute bodhicitta includes an acute awareness of the suffering all creatures endure when they are ignorant of their own nature. It also includes a longing to release all beings from that deepest level of suffering. This is the state the Buddha attained, as well as those who followed in his footsteps to attain complete enlightenment. Most of us need to train along the gradual path of relative bodhicitta before we will be able to experience absolute bodhicitta. And developing relative bodhicitta always involves two aspects, aspiration and application. Aspiration bodhicitta involves cultivating the heartfelt desire to raise all sentient beings to the level at which they completely recognize their true nature, not just conceptually, but they experience the recognition of their own true nature. And we begin by thinking, I wish to attain complete awakening in order to help all sentient beings attain the same state. Most Buddhist practices begin with some prayer to that effect. And reciting prayers like that is helpful in that it helps us to broaden the goal of our practice. We're not just practicing for ourselves or our loved ones or, people we know. We're not just practicing for temporary happiness. We are practicing so that we can attain complete awakening in order to help all sentient beings attain complete awakening. But prayers and aspirations are only words until we actually spend some time working with the ordinary and immeasurable states of loving kindness and compassion. There's no way that we can experience complete happiness and an end to suffering for ourselves without directly experiencing our own and others' desire for happiness and release from suffering. Working toward our own release from suffering is like pulling the needle only out of one cheek. we still have that other needle in this cheek. And as long as that needle remains in our other cheek, we'll always feel some discomfort, pain, or fear. Application bodhicitta focuses on the path of attaining the goal of awakening other beings. So the application bodhicitta is the means by which we carry out our aspiration bodhicitta. And there are many ways to practice application bodhicitta. Application bodhicitta would include actually teaching beings how to awaken. Most of us aren't there yet, and luckily there's a lot of other things we can do to start engaging in application bodhicitta. There are many ways to practice application bodhicitta. For example, refraining from misconduct, such as stealing, lying, gossiping, and speaking or acting in ways that intentionally cause pain. We can refrain from those things. We can act generously towards others. We can patch up quarrels. We can speak gently and calmly instead of flying off the handle. We can rejoice in the good fortune of others and the good things that happen to other people instead of allowing ourselves to become jealous or envious. Yongey Mingyur Rinpoche says, this kind of conduct extends the experience of loving kindness and compassion in meditation into every aspect of daily life. This creates a win-win situation for everybody. We win because we recognize that we're not alone in experiencing difficult emotions or problematic situations. As this recognition sinks in, we begin to feel a deeper sense of confidence in ourselves and are able to respond more thoughtfully and compassionately to others. Those around us win because, having developed an intuitive sense of their suffering, we begin to act toward them in kinder, more considerate ways. And they, in turn, begin to behave more compassionately toward others. So that's it for today. I hope that you will continue to practice these meditations on your own, and that through the development of empathy, you will be freed from the pain of solitude and separateness. And always, at the end of any beneficial activity, including even a short stint of meditation, please remember to dedicate the merit. And we will do that now. By this effort, may all sentient beings be free of suffering. May their minds be filled with the nectar of virtue. In this way, may all causes resulting in suffering be extinguished, and only the light of compassion shine throughout all realms.